I used to think I controlled the board, but I was merely a pawn in my brother's cruel joke. When I refused to babysit his 3 kids at the 11th hour to sign a multi-million-dollar contract, he shipped them in a taxi to my old address, expecting me to surrender. He had no idea the new owner was an unforgiving man. That single decision turned his arrogance into a life sentence. Hello, wonderful listeners of Haley Revenge Stories, and thank you for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us without the budget needed to keep operating. If you find today's story entertaining and valuable, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our dedicated staff can pay their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen, or by clicking the link in the video description or the pinned comment below. My name is Emery Reed. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the harsh buzzing of my phone shattered the absolute silence of my downtown apartment. I was already awake, sitting perfectly straight at my dining table, surrounded by towering stacks of financial reports. As a senior data analyst at Nexus Global Solutions, I was precisely 3 hours away from boarding a flight to Chicago to finalize a multi-million-dollar acquisition. This was the pinnacle of my career, a moment I had sacrificed sleep, relationships, and my own sanity to reach. My suitcase was packed. My suit was pressed. My mind was a steel trap. Then, I saw the caller ID. Leo, my older brother. I stared at the glowing screen. A call from Leo at 4 in the morning never meant an emergency. It meant an inconvenience he expected me to solve. Taking a deep breath, I answered the call, keeping my voice low and composed. "Leo, do you have any idea what time it is?" I asked. Loud, chaotic noises flooded through the speaker. I could hear the distinct sound of a zipper struggling to close over an overstuffed suitcase and his wife, Sarah, complaining about forgetting her premium sunscreen. "Emery, finally," Leo said, his voice entirely devoid of panic or apology. "Listen, Sarah and I decided we desperately needed a break. We booked a last-minute luxury cabin in Maine for the week. We are heading to the airport right now." I rubbed my temples, feeling a familiar migraine forming behind my eyes. "Okay, have a safe flight. Why are you calling me?" "Do not play dumb, Em," he scoffed, the signature arrogance dripping from every syllable. "I need you to take the kids. It will just be for 5 or 6 days. You know they love hanging out at your place in the suburbs." The sheer audacity of his demand momentarily left me breathless. He was not asking. He was informing me. This was the established dynamic of our family. Leo demanded, and everyone else bent over backwards to accommodate his whims. But I was not the same compliant little sister anymore. "Leo? Absolutely not," I replied, my tone hardening into a flat, immovable wall. "I am leaving for Chicago in less than 3 hours for the most important corporate deal of my life. I cannot watch your 3 children. I will not even be in the state." "Oh, come on," Leo groaned, loudly exasperated. "You are just crunching numbers for some soulless corporation." "This is family, Emery. Family comes first. Just call in sick, or do your little spreadsheets from home." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. My little spreadsheets are securing a $20 million merger. And even if I were completely free, I no longer live at the Oak Ridge house. I moved out and sold it months ago. I live in the city now. I told you this. There was a brief pause on the line, but if I expected a sudden realization or an apology, I was utterly disappointed. "Look, I do not have time for your selfish excuses or your dramatic lies about moving," Leo snapped, his voice rising in irritation. "I already ordered a taxi. The driver is picking the kids up and dropping them off at the Oak Ridge address. They will be there in 30 minutes. "Are you insane?" I yelled, my careful composure finally cracking. "You put 3 small children in a cab by themselves in the middle of a freezing storm? Leo, I am telling you, I do not own that house anymore. There is a stranger living there, Stop being so dramatic, Emery. I know you are just trying to get out of helping your own brother. Well, it is too late. The cab is paid for. The kids have their bags. Sarah and I are walking to our boarding gate right now, and I am turning my phone off. Be a good aunt for once in your life. The line went completely dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen as it faded to black. The silence in my apartment rushed back in, but inside my chest, my heart was hammering against my ribs. This was not a mere oversight. This was a calculated, deliberate act of sabotage. For the past 2 years, I had been systematically cutting the toxic strings my family used to control me. I stopped lending them money. I stopped dropping everything to solve their manufactured crises. I built a successful life entirely independent of their chaotic, narcissistic shadow. Leo knew exactly what he was doing. He chose the morning of my biggest career milestone to pull this stunt. He genuinely believed that if he forced my hand, if he physically dumped his children on my supposed doorstep, I would fold. He thought I would abandon my flight, jeopardize my job, and revert to being the obedient servant of the family. He thought he held all the power. He thought wrong. Very, very wrong. While I was marching down the hallway of my high-rise apartment building, dragging my heavy rolling suitcase toward the elevator and fighting the overwhelming urge to hurl my phone against the brick wall, a drastically different, deeply disturbing scenario was taking shape exactly 30 miles away. My arrogant brother had been telling the truth about one specific thing. He had indeed forced his 3 young children into a stranger's taxi. But Leo was completely and utterly ignorant of the terrifying nightmare he had just unleashed upon himself. The property I used to own in the quiet, affluent, and perfectly manicured suburb of Oak Ridge no longer belonged to a young, accommodating corporate analyst. I had officially transferred the deed to Silas Thorne. Silas was effectively a ghost of a man. He was a retired military intelligence operative who treated civilian life with the exact same rigid, paranoid, and uncompromising discipline he had strictly applied to hostile foreign war zones. During the brief property handover process months prior, I had noticed his sharp eyes constantly scanning exits, evaluating structural vulnerabilities, and calculating threat levels. In the mere 6 months since he took physical possession of the property, he had systematically eradicated every single trace of my cozy, welcoming home. The decorative wooden privacy fences were entirely replaced by 9-foot-tall reinforced steel barricades. The charming garden gnomes and flower beds were aggressively swapped for motion-activated tactical floodlights and military-grade laser tripwires. Silent, high-definition infrared cameras now actively monitored every single blade of grass. It was no longer a suburban residence. It was a hardened fortress, specifically designed to keep the entire outside world firmly at bay. It was roughly -8 degrees outside that dark morning. A historic, punishing winter blizzard was suffocating the entire state, burying the local roads under thick, treacherous sheets of black ice and dumping fresh snow at an alarming rate of over 2 inches per hour. Through this violent, blinding whiteout, a bright yellow city taxi violently struggled up the steep, icy incline of Silas's private driveway. The heavy vehicle skidded sideways before finally slamming its brakes, coming to a sudden halt just inches from the imposing, locked steel security gate. The rear passenger doors forcefully swung open, and the freezing, howling wind immediately rushed inside the heated cab. Out stepped my oldest niece, Lily, who was exactly 10 years old, closely followed by her 7-year-old twin siblings, Mason and Mia. They were wearing thin, woefully inadequate winter coats, tightly clutching flimsy canvas overnight bags, and shivering uncontrollably in the brutal chill. There was no responsible adult in the back seat to guide them. There was no warm, loving embrace waiting for them on the porch. The taxi driver, a burly, exhausted-looking man, wearing a heavy insulated parka, stepped out into the freezing storm, clearly regretting his terrible decision to take this long-distance fare. He jogged up to the reinforced stone pillar, holding the main security intercom, and repeatedly slammed his thumb against the glowing call button. Deep inside the fortified house, Silas was already wide awake. His daily routine always began strictly at 3 in the morning with boiling black coffee and rigorous physical training. The perimeter proximity alarm in his dedicated control room let out a low, pulsing chime, instantly alerting him to the perimeter breach. Silas calmly tapped a glass screen on his primary console, instantly bringing up a crisp, high-resolution night vision feed of his front gate. He pressed the two-way communication button, his stoic face bathed in the cold blue light of a dozen surveillance monitors. "Identify yourself and state your business immediately," Silas ordered. His voice did not boom loudly. Rather, it was low, flat, and raspy, carrying a quiet lethality that immediately made the aggressive driver take a nervous step back. The driver stared directly at the camera lens, visibly sensing the intense, unblinking eyes of a highly dangerous man watching his every move. "Look, man, I am just a hired driver," the man yelled loudly over the howling, deafening wind. "Some guy named Leo handed me $100 in cash to drop these 3 kids at this exact address. I drove them here safely. My job is officially done." Before Silas could even process a response, the panicked driver turned around, sprinted back to the running taxi, slammed the heavy door, and rapidly reversed out of the long driveway. The bright red taillights completely vanished into the swirling, thick snow, abandoning 3 helpless, terrified children alone in the dead of the freezing winter. A normal, compassionate homeowner would have instantly rushed outside in a blind panic, throwing open the front doors to rescue the freezing kids. But Silas Thorne absolutely did not operate on human emotion or misplaced pity. He operated strictly on calculated threat assessment. In his decades of covert, high-stakes operations, sudden, chaotic anomalies appearing at his front door were never harmless accidents. They were always calculated ambushes. He remained perfectly, eerily still in his dark command center. His sharp mind rapidly raced through a dozen different tactical scenarios. Was this a clever distraction? Were these innocent-looking children secretly being used as living bait by a violent home invasion crew, waiting just outside the camera's restricted field of view? Without a single second of hesitation, Silas firmly activated his secondary secure servers, ensuring every single piece of live video footage and crisp audio was being actively recorded and simultaneously backed up to an encrypted offshore cloud drive. He knew he needed an impenetrable, undeniable chain of evidence. Outside, the physical situation was rapidly becoming dire. The harsh wind chill was drastically dropping closer to -15 degrees. Little Mia began to openly cry, her warm tears instantly freezing on her pale cheeks. Lily, desperately trying to be brave for her family, wrapped her small arms tightly around her younger siblings, forcefully pulling them against the cold iron gate in a futile attempt to block the piercing wind. They stamped their small boots on the icy pavement and looked desperately toward the dark, completely silent house. Silas watched them relentlessly. He intensely scrutinized the surrounding dark tree lines through advanced thermal imaging. He carefully analyzed the exact weight and shape of the children's bags, actively looking for hidden weapons or concealed explosive devices. He deliberately forced those 3 children to stand in the freezing, dangerous blizzard for exactly 4 agonizing minutes. He had to be absolutely, entirely certain that they were truly alone, and that his secure perimeter was not secretly compromised. Only when his rigorous, unforgiving tactical checklist was entirely complete did he finally exhale a slow, measured breath and press the heavy gate release mechanism. The massive iron doors let out a deep, echoing mechanical groan as they slowly parted. Silas stepped out onto his snow-covered concrete porch. He did not rush forward carrying a warm thermal blanket. He did not offer a comforting, reassuring smile. He simply stood there like a towering, immovable stone statue, a dark, intimidating silhouette against the faint interior glow of the house. waiting in absolute terrifying silence to see exactly what these unexpected intruders would dare to do next. As I would later learn from obsessively reviewing every single second of those high-definition security tapes, my foolish brother had not merely made a simple scheduling error. He had carelessly delivered his own flesh and blood directly into the hands of a dangerous man who possessed zero tolerance for foolishness and endless, terrifying resources to destroy anyone who crossed his threshold. The heavy wheels of the Boeing jet slammed onto the snowy runway at Chicago O'Hare at exactly 9:15 in the morning. As soon as the flight attendant announced it was safe to disable airplane mode, my phone violently vibrated in my palm. It did not just ring, it completely erupted. I stared down at the screen, watching the notifications pile up in real time. 68 missed calls, 142 unread text messages. They were not well wishes for my monumental business trip. They were venomous, unhinged threats pouring in from Leo, my mother, and my father. They called me a monster. They accused me of child endangerment. They promised to completely destroy my corporate career for leaving 3 innocent children out in the freezing cold. My blood turned to absolute ice, not out of panic, but out of a deep, focused, and boiling rage. Before I could even begin to process the sheer audacity of their barrage, an unfamiliar local number flashed across the screen. I answered it while striding purposefully down the crowded jet bridge. It was Detective Miller from the Oak Ridge Police Department. His voice was incredibly grim, carrying the heavy weight of a man who had seen too much. "Miss Reed, we currently have 3 young children safe in our custody," the detective stated firmly. They were abandoned at a private, highly fortified compound registered to a Mr. Silas Thorne. Mr. Thorne contacted us immediately and handed over extensive security footage. The children claim you are their aunt and that you live at that address. Can you explain this situation? I did not miss a single beat. I maintained my perfectly calm, razor-sharp corporate tone. "Detective, I sold that property over 6 months ago. I am currently standing in an airport in Chicago on business. My older brother, Leo, purposefully shoved his children into a taxi and sent them to my old address to force me to babysit while he flew to Maine for a luxury vacation." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. "I see," Detective Miller finally responded, his tone instantly shifting from suspicious of me to purely professional. "Thank you for the clarification, Miss Reed. We will be launching a full, immediate criminal investigation into child abandonment and severe negligence." I ended the call and instantly dialed my private attorney, Julian. I paid him a retainer of $5,000 a month specifically for his absolute ruthlessness in high-stakes situations. "Julian," I said, easily dodging slow travelers in the busy airport terminal, "Leo just dropped a nuclear bomb on his own life. He abandoned his kids at my old house. I need you to establish a rock-solid evidence file for criminal neglect. Pull the property transfer deeds proving I do not own that house. Subpoena the local taxi company for their dispatch logs and payment receipts. I want an airtight case ready by the time I land back home." Julian let out a sharp, knowing sigh. "Consider it done, Emery. I will have the paperwork filed before lunch." I hailed an executive black car to take me directly to the Nexus Global downtown headquarters. Sitting in the plush leather back seat, I realized the bitter truth. I could not fly back to rescue the kids immediately. Doing so would completely kill the $20 million merger and give my toxic family exactly what they wanted. I had to play this smart. Instead of panicking, I opened my encrypted cloud drive. For the past 2 years, I had meticulously saved and backed up every single family group chat, knowing one day their manipulation would cross a legal line. I began filtering the search history from the past 48 hours. What I uncovered made my stomach violently churn. This was not just Leo being his usual reckless self. It was a highly calculated, collective family conspiracy. I read long, detailed messages from my own parents, explicitly instructing Leo to drop the kids at my door. "Force her hand," my mother had actually typed in the chat. "If she refuses to take them, we will threaten to expose her as a negligent, heartless aunt to her fancy corporate bosses. She will have to pay us a massive settlement to make the public scandal go away, or she will be forced to fund a full-time luxury nanny out of her own pocket. It is about time Emery paid her dues to this family and learned her place." They were literally plotting to hold my career and reputation for ransom. They expected me to panic, throw thousands of dollars at them to save the family name, and crawl back under their control. The black car smoothly pulled up to the towering glass skyscraper. I stepped out onto the icy pavement, my posture impeccably straight, my expression an unreadable mask of pure lethal determination. I was done being their target. I walked straight up to the executive boardroom, completely bypassing the standard morning pleasantries. I gathered every ounce of authority I had fiercely built over the last 10 years. "Listen up," I announced to the room of 20 senior executives, cutting off their ongoing presentation. "We are drastically accelerating this timeline. We are signing the final acquisition documents today, not tomorrow. Furthermore, I am calling an emergency press briefing with our public relations department this afternoon. I am taking immediate, preemptive steps to completely insulate this company and my professional standing from a severe developing legal situation involving my estranged relatives." My colleagues were visibly stunned by my aggressive pivot, but my flawless track record demanded absolute compliance. While they frantically scrambled to execute my new orders, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the gray Chicago skyline. My family thought they had brilliantly trapped me in a corner. Instead, they had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to sever their hold on my life permanently, and I was going right for the jugular. While I was meticulously dismantling my family's power over me from a glass boardroom in Chicago, Leo and his wife were happily touching down at the Bangor International Airport in Maine. According to the police reports I later acquired, Leo had spent the entire 3-hour flight bragging loudly to the flight attendants about his exclusive 5-star winter cabin rental. He was fully expecting a private driver holding a placard with his name on it. Instead, the moment he and Sarah confidently stepped off the jet bridge, they were immediately intercepted by 4 stern-faced officers from the state police. The officers did not ask politely. They read my brother his Miranda rights in front of dozens of shocked passengers. When Leo tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just a massive misunderstanding with his sister, the lead officer forcefully spun him around and slapped heavy steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists. Sarah began screaming hysterically as she was given the exact same treatment. Their luxurious, $10,000 vacation evaporated into thin air, replaced by the grim reality of a cold, concrete holding cell awaiting extradition back to our home state. By the time I confidently pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Oak Ridge Police Department 24 hours later, I was not the terrified, overwhelmed woman my family expected to find. I did not walk in with tear-stained cheeks or a trembling voice. I arrived dressed in my sharpest charcoal executive suit, carrying a heavy, structured leather briefcase. I walked with the precise, measured strides of a corporate analyst who had already calculated every single variable of the upcoming confrontation. Detective Miller was waiting for me near the front desk. He looked exhausted, clearly having spent the entire night dealing with the horrific logistical nightmare of processing 3 abandoned children into the emergency foster system. I shook his hand firmly and immediately handed him a thick, heavily tabbed binder. Inside were over 100 pages of indexed evidence that Julian, my attorney, and I had compiled. It contained the notarized property deeds, proving I had no legal ties to the old house, the exact timeline of Leo's frantic taxi booking, and a comprehensive background check on Silas Thorne to prove exactly how dangerous the drop-off environment had been. I was not presenting myself as a helpless victim. I was functioning as a highly efficient, undisputed asset to the prosecution. Before Detective Miller could even begin reviewing the pristine documents, the precinct doors violently banged open. My mother and father stormed into the lobby. Their faces were flushed red with absolute indignation. They did not immediately ask about the safety of their grandchildren. They did not ask if the kids were traumatized from nearly freezing to death in a massive winter storm. Their eyes furiously scanned the room until they locked onto me. "Emery, what on earth have you done?" my mother shrieked, her voice echoing sharply against the linoleum floors. She marched right up to me, aggressively pointing her finger just inches from my face. "Your brother called us from a jail cell in Maine. A jail cell. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for our family? Tell these officers right now that this is all a stupid misunderstanding and drop these ridiculous charges immediately." My father stood right behind her, crossing his arms in a blatant attempt to physically intimidate me. "Your mother is right. You are going to ruin Leo's entire career over a petty grudge. You were supposed to be home. It is your fault you were not there to open the door. You will march into that detective's office, sign whatever waiver they need, and fix this mess right now to save face for this family." A few years ago, the sheer volume of their anger would have made me instantly crumble. I would have frantically apologized, assumed all the blame, and spent thousands of dollars trying to make the problem disappear. But as I looked at them now, I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. Before I spoke a single word, I discreetly pressed a hidden button on the side of my smartwatch. The device quietly buzzed against my wrist, silently confirming that a high-definition audio recording had officially started. I needed every single threat perfectly captured for the legal bloodbath that was about to follow. "I will not drop a single charge," I stated, my voice as smooth and unforgiving as broken glass. I did not force Leo to put his 3 children in a random taxi. I did not force him to abandon them at a high-security compound owned by a retired military operative, and I certainly did not force the 2 of you to help him plan it. My mother visibly recoiled, her aggressive posture faltering for a split second. "We do not know what you are talking about. We had nothing to do with this." I slowly reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a stapled stack of brightly colored papers. They were high-resolution, physical printouts of the family group chat logs I had recovered from my encrypted cloud drive. "I have over 50 messages right here, printed and time-stamped," I said, holding the papers up so my parents could clearly see their own words highlighted in bright yellow ink. "This message from yesterday afternoon is you, Mother, explicitly telling Leo to drop the kids at my door to force my hand. And this one is from you, Father, suggesting that if I complain, you will threaten to ruin my corporate reputation to extort me for nanny money. This is not just child abandonment anymore. This is a documented, premeditated conspiracy to commit extortion and child endangerment. You are not just bystanders. You are legally complicit." The color completely drained from my father's face. He opened his mouth to shout, but no sound came out. My mother stared at the printed papers as if they were venomous snakes about to strike her. They had always assumed my silence over the years was a sign of weakness, never realizing I was simply observing, collecting data, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. "You cannot use those," my father finally stammered, his false bravado entirely shattering. "That is private family business. You cannot show those to the police. We are your parents." Family business ended the exact second you decided my career, and my boundaries were collateral damage for Leo's luxury vacation, I replied without breaking eye contact. "I have already handed duplicate copies of these chats to Detective Miller and my private attorney. I am refusing any and all settlements. I am refusing mediation. You expected me to just roll over and pay for your mistakes like the obedient little girl I used to be. But you are looking at the wrong woman." I turned my back on them and walked purposefully toward the detective's office, leaving my parents standing frozen in the middle of the police station lobby. A deeply satisfying realization washed over me as I walked away. I was completely recording their panicked, whispered arguments behind me. They were utterly terrified, finally comprehending that the daughter they had spent a lifetime trying to control was the exact person who was going to lock them all away. The trial commenced precisely 3 months after that freezing January morning. The sprawling mahogany courtroom in the downtown district felt suffocatingly tense, heavy with the weight of impending justice. Leo sat at the defense table, wearing an ill-fitting gray suit, his previous arrogance entirely replaced by a terrified pale sweat. He was facing multiple felony charges for severe child endangerment. Desperate to save their precious golden boy from a lengthy prison sentence, my parents had filed an emergency legal petition for full, permanent custody of Lily, Mason, and Mia. Their defense strategy was blatantly obvious and deeply manipulative. If they could successfully convince the honorable judge that the children had a stable, wealthy, and loving environment with their grandparents, they could argue that Leo's lapse in judgment was an isolated incident that did not require harsh punitive incarceration. When my father confidently took the witness stand, he placed his right hand on the heavy Bible and swore a solemn oath to tell the complete truth. He then proceeded to look directly at the judge and weave a fabricated, elaborate narrative of immense financial stability and moral superiority. "Your Honor," my father stated smoothly, casually adjusting his expensive silk tie to project an air of old money confidence, "we are deeply established, highly respected members of this community. We own a sprawling 4-bedroom estate in the prestigious Willow Creek neighborhood, completely mortgage-free. We possess the significant financial resources, the physical space, and the emotional maturity to provide these 3 wonderful children with a perfect, secure upbringing. My son made a foolish scheduling error under immense stress, but these children belong with their biological family, safely under our luxurious roof." Before my attorney, Julian, could even begin tearing into my father's mountain of lies during the cross-examination, the state prosecution called their key witness to the stand. The heavy wooden double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud creak, and Silas Thorne walked down the center aisle. He wore a crisp, tailored black suit that barely concealed his intimidating, muscular frame. His posture was perfectly rigid, a stark reminder of his decades spent in covert military intelligence. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at Leo. He looked only at the judge. Silas did not mince words. Under oath, he meticulously detailed the exact atmospheric conditions of that terrifying winter morning. He provided the court with his unedited, high-definition security footage, securely stored on an encrypted physical drive. The large flat-screen monitors inside the courtroom flickered to life, displaying the horrifying reality of the situation. The entire gallery watched in dead silence as 3 small children shivered uncontrollably against a reinforced steel gate in -15-degree weather, completely abandoned in a violent blizzard. The defendant did not simply drop his children off at a safe, familiar location, Silas testified, his raspy, cold voice echoing off the high ceilings like a gavel strike. He maliciously abandoned them in a hostile, life-threatening environment. Based on my rigorous professional threat assessment protocols, if I had not intervened when I did, those 3 children would have suffered fatal hypothermia within exactly 20 minutes. This was not a harmless mistake. This was a calculated, deliberate act of absolute negligence by a man who valued a luxury vacation over human life. The judge, a stern woman with over 2 decades of family law experience, looked completely disgusted by the video footage. But the true catastrophic blow to my family's remaining shred of dignity came when Julian formally called me to the witness stand for the final testimony. Regarding the custody petition, I smoothed down my tailored navy blazer, walked past my glaring brother, and sat firmly in the leather chair. I looked directly into my parents' eyes, feeling a profound sense of closure. "Miss Reed?" Julian asked clearly, pacing gracefully in front of the jury box with his hands clasped behind his back. "Your parents have formally testified under oath today that they own the Willow Creek estate outright. They have presented this specific real estate asset as a primary reason they should be granted immediate custody of your nieces and nephew. Do you have any direct knowledge regarding the actual ownership of this property? I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, pulled out a thick, legally binding document marked with a red corporate seal, and handed it directly to the court bailiff to present to the judge. Yes, I do, I answered, my voice steady, loud, and completely devoid of emotion. My parents do not own that house. They never have. Exactly 7 years ago, they filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lost their previous home to a massive bank foreclosure. To prevent them from living on the street, I quietly purchased the Willow Creek property entirely with my own corporate bonuses. I bought it through a private, anonymous trust called the Nexus Horizon Group. I am the sole trustee, the primary shareholder, and the sole legal owner of the estate they currently occupy. A loud collective gasp erupted from the public gallery. My father's jaw dropped entirely open, his face turning an alarming shade of deep purple. My mother gripped the wooden railing in front of her, practically shaking with raw, unfiltered shock. They had spent years bragging to their elite country club friends about their massive, paid-off mansion, completely oblivious to the fact that I, the daughter they constantly belittled, was the invisible landlord silently subsidizing their fake, luxurious lifestyle. Furthermore, I continued smoothly, ignoring the frantic, whispered panic suddenly erupting at the defense table, when I allowed them to move into my property, I had them sign a standard, heavily binding residential lease agreement under the guise of an anonymous corporate management firm. Page 12. Section 4 of that specific contract explicitly states that any tenant found legally complicit in severe criminal activity, including the endangerment of a minor or financial extortion, is subject to immediate, non-negotiable eviction within 30 days. The courtroom descended into absolute chaos. My father began screaming wild objections, entirely forgetting he was not the lawyer. He slammed his fists against the table. "This is a total fabrication," my father yelled desperately, his voice cracking under the weight of his collapsing reality. "She is lying. We are her parents. We raised her. She cannot do this to us. That house is ours. The documented property deed, the anonymous trust records, and the corresponding financial wire transfers firmly prove otherwise," the judge fired back, aggressively banging her wooden gavel. She adjusted her reading glasses to scrutinize the pristine papers Julian had submitted. She looked down at my parents with a glare of pure, unadulterated judicial fury. "You sat in my courtroom and committed blatant perjury to manipulate the legal system. You possess no substantial financial assets. You have zero legal right to the home you currently occupy. And the documented chat logs submitted previously by the prosecution clearly prove you actively encouraged the reckless abandonment of these 3 innocent children." The judge did not need any further deliberation. She straightened her heavy black robe, folded her hands together, and delivered a ruling that entirely decimated my family's legacy. She permanently denied my parents' petition for custody, officially labeling them an active danger to the physical and emotional well-being of the minors. Then, she turned her fierce, unforgiving gaze directly onto Leo. For the severe crime of felony child endangerment and reckless abandonment, she sentenced my arrogant, entitled brother to exactly 4 years in a state penitentiary, without the possibility of early parole. As the heavy steel handcuffs clicked loudly around Leo's wrists for the second time, taking him away to begin his long, miserable sentence, I slowly stepped down from the witness stand. My parents were openly weeping, completely shattered by the sudden, absolute loss of their golden child, their fake wealth, and their stolen home. The grand illusion of their superiority had been utterly destroyed by a few simple pieces of paper and the cold, hard truth. They had tried to use me as a pawn, but they forgot I was the one who bought the entire board. The echo of the gavel was the final sound that severed my ties to the past. The moment the judge finalized Leo's 4-year prison sentence, Sarah stood up from the gallery. She did not shed a single tear for her husband. Instead, she calmly walked over to his defense attorney and handed him a sealed envelope containing signed divorce papers. She turned around and walked out of the courtroom without looking back, leaving Leo to face a bleak, lonely future entirely on his own. As for Lily, Mason, and Mia, the state intervened exactly as they should have. Because my parents were deemed utterly unfit by the court, the children were placed in the custody of our great-aunt Clara. Clara lived 2 states away, entirely removed from the toxic, narcissistic poison of my immediate family. She was a kind, grounded woman who valued peace over appearances. I knew they would be safe with her. But I also knew the financial burden of raising 3 young children was incredibly heavy. Quietly, using my own corporate bonuses, I established an anonymous educational trust fund with an initial deposit of $500,000. The money was securely locked away, strictly designated for their college tuition and living expenses once they turned 18. They would never know the money came from the aunt their father tried to destroy, but they would never have to suffer for the catastrophic mistakes of their parents. My parents faced a reality far colder than the winter storm they had forced my nieces and nephew to endure. Exactly 30 days after the trial concluded, the eviction notice was officially executed. The county sheriff arrived at the Willow Creek estate and physically escorted my mother and father off the property. The massive, mortgage-free mansion they had paraded around their elite country club for 7 years was immediately placed on the open real estate market. With 0 assets, a completely destroyed reputation, and no golden son to bail them out, they were forced to move into a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the industrial side of the city. I never visited them. I permanently blocked their phone numbers. For the first time in my 32 years of life, I owed them absolutely nothing. In the quiet months that followed, an unexpected friendship blossomed from the chaos. I began visiting the Oak Ridge Fortress. Silas Thorne, the retired military operative who had inadvertently become the catalyst for my ultimate freedom, turned out to be an incredibly profound man. Once every 2 weeks, I would drive out to the heavily fortified property. We would sit on his secure back patio, drink dark roast coffee, and share quiet dinners. We rarely spoke about the trial. Instead, we talked about the true meaning of freedom, the vital importance of rigid boundaries, and the profound peace that comes from eliminating toxic threats from your life. Silas taught me that trusting someone is a high privilege they must earn, not an automatic right granted by genetics. I finally understood the absolute truth. Family is not defined by shared blood. Blood only makes you relatives. Family is composed of the people you actively choose to walk alongside. It is the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your success without asking for a financial cut, and who would never dream of leaving you out in the freezing cold. Tonight, I am standing on the sprawling glass balcony of my downtown penthouse. The city lights of Chicago are glittering brightly beneath me, reflecting off the signed $20 million corporate merger contract resting safely on my desk inside. The crisp night air hits my face, and for the first time in my entire life, my shoulders feel completely light. The heavy, suffocating chain of false responsibility has been permanently broken. I did not just survive my family's ultimate betrayal. I orchestrated my own absolute liberation. Thank you so very much, my wonderful listeners, for staying with me until the end of this incredible journey. I would love to know where you are listening from today, so please tell me in the comments below. If you found today's story engaging and satisfying, please consider supporting our channel with just $1. You can easily scan the PayPal QR code right here on your screen, or use the PayPal link located in the description and pinned comment. Your kindness allows our dedicated team to pay their salaries, feed their families, and continue creating these powerful stories for you every single day. Stay safe, stay strong, and always protect your peace.